The migrant refugee crisis is one of the biggest world issues affecting our Earth today. And Europe is the continent currently most affected by this crisis. In 2013, Europe hosted almost 80% of all the asylum seekers in the world. Germany houses more than a third of all the asylum seekers in Europe. A big part of the current refugee crisis is the wars that occurred in the Middle East as part of the Arab Spring. For example, in Syria, the civil war has created 13.5 million asylum seekers and refugees fleeing Syria alone. For these people, their only option for getting a safe place to live is to travel an incredibly dangerous route on overpacked, unsafe boats where thousands have died. And even once they reach mainland Europe, they often have to walk for weeks or months carrying everything they own on their backs. Most of the asylum seekers coming from the Middle East will dock along the southern coast of Europe in countries like Italy or Greece. From there, it should be an easy trip to their destination because of the Schengen Agreement in Europe for free travel. However, the recent unrest in Europe is causing a lot of countries to begin closing their borders and refusing to accept any asylum seekers. The vast majority of these refugees and asylum seekers are coming from Syria, Iraq, and Afghanistan. In Syria, the war going on for the past 6 years between the government, the rebels, assorted jihadist groups, and Daesh is the main cause of citizens having to flee. In Iraq, the multiple wars that have been happening since as far back as the 1980s have made much of the country unlivable. And in Afghanistan, the conflicts over the past 40 years have done the same. One of the most effective ways of helping this issue would be to address the problem at its roots. If the native countries of all the asylum seekers were a safe place to live and raise a family, we would not be facing this problem. Secondly, we need to address the unequal placement of asylum seekers in Europe. Over a third of the asylum seekers traveling to Europe have applied for status in Germany. However, some countries like Hungary are actively refusing to accept refugees and going so far as to build barbed wire fences to keep people out. This is causing even more bad will in Europe. On top of lies and anger towards refugees, it is also causing tension between countries taking an overproportional amount of asylum seekers and countries taking on none. Many right-wing parties are campaigning on promises of taking back their country or preserving their homeland. If the governments all take a negative stance on refugees and asylum seekers, then we will be in an even worse situation than we are right now. We need to promote goodwill towards asylum seekers and the tolerance that Canada has to get the most number of countries helping possible. Properly run registering services for asylum seekers would also go a long way in solving the issue. Uniform screening of people would decrease the risk of terrorism, one of the main concerns of many countries for letting in a huge amount of people. It would also allow the most needy families the opportunity to be resettled first. Finally, we need organizing bodies like the United Nations and European Union to come together and streamline the process of accepting refugees. Comprehensive regulations and the promotion of acceptance would be a huge step for so many countries. This has to stop being seen as an issue on the other side of the world and instead as something we should all be making every effort to help, because this should never happen again.